And then just like every time the briefest accidental thing happens with Crashlands 2, like we can't make things stop happening, you know? So, I'm really hoping once it's actually officially announced and there's a trailer, all this kind of stuff, that this trend, once we're actually trying to do it,
hopefully that continues.
Butterscotch.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 418 of Coffee with Butterscotch, the game dev comedy podcast of Butterscotch Shenanigans. I'm Seth and I'm the games programmer.
I'm Adam and I'm blown away by how 418 sounds so much bigger than 418.
Yeah,
you know?
It does.
I'm Sam and I've been here for apparently 417 hours. Soon to be 418. That's crazy.
That's a lot. That's a lot of hours.
Yeah.
This is a show where we talk about life, business, and working in the games industry. And today's June 2nd, 20 Jubilee. Before we get started, we do have a warning. There's going to be profanity in this show. And we'd also like to thank our recurring supporters over at moneygrab.bscotch.net. We grabbed their money and it was great. We loved it. And if you'd like to help support the podcast, you can head on over there and we'll grab your money. All of it. I do have to warn you, if you type that URL into your browser,
just gone.
We have all of your
It's
money.
like a siphon, where it just like somehow defies all reason and you just turn it on and then it just keeps on going.
Yeah. It's kind of like how in movies, like how they portray hacking and stuff like that. It's like suddenly they've just like drained everyone's bank accounts, that kind of thing. We've actually figured that shit out a long time ago.
Yep.
And we're doing it.
Yeah, we invented a skeleton key is what we call it because it gives us access to just literally everything.
All the skeletons. We have your bones. We've got them. They're in the vault.
Those phalanges, those are ours.
Speaking of, I don't want to get too off on this tangent, but there was an episode of Bones that I saw a long time ago. I watched where this like evil genius serial killer, right, has basically they find the bones of his victim and they're like scanning the bones, right, and then all of a sudden their whole systems get like infected and like just brought down by a virus, right? It turns out that he had etched into the bones some commands that would cause the scanner to like process them as executable code. Whoa. And like take down their whole. So I remember watching that and being like, this, like I've suspended my disbelief for the show already, but this,
that's a cool idea.
It kicked it up a notch though. Like
this is why everybody says when you're programming a bone scanner, you got to sanitize the inputs.
Sanitize the inputs.
Otherwise, somebody's going to etch a semicolon onto a bone, and as soon as you scan it, it gets inserted into your program, and it's over.
Yeah,
it's a common problem. We've all been there.
Yep. Bone injection, I think is the name.
We got some stuff to actually talk about, which is Crashlands 2. We are officially announcing it, unveiling it. Well, not today when we're recording this, but today when the episode airs, which is June 7th, right?
Yeah. And long-time listeners might be thinking, you've been talking about Crashlands 2 for like 2 years or 3 years.
We've been talking about it.
Yes.
So what do you mean you're announcing it?
Yeah. What we mean is that there's actual visible evidence that it exists. In particular, there's a Steam store page, which, if you've gotten just an ounce, a chocolate chip's weight worth of goodness out of this podcast at any point in time, go wishlist Crashlands 2 on Steam right now. Because
the best thing you can do for us is to go do that.
That's the biggest support you can give us because it starts getting those algorithms out hot. And you'll see the trailer.
Even if you don't plan on buying it, just do it.
100%.
Do it 100%. I mean, you'll buy it, but it's good.
So what we're really excited to announce is one, you can actually see the thing in action. So there's a whole trailer with the usual goofy voice stuff going on and kind of snappy edits and all that. And then on top of that, the game's coming to announced for Steam, as well as exclusively for mobile with Netflix, which we're very excited about also. So we got our kind of initial launch platforms, which kind of comically is the same as, back in the day with the original one. We went Steam and mobile oriented, for launch. And that'll be kind of the same deal for Crashlands 2. And sometime in 2024, can't say when for a variety of reasons.
Mostly we don't know. That's the main one. But also, even if we did, it's just like with all these things, there's always a million ducks that got to get in a row, to make
You got to line up your
this
ducks.
happen. So
Yeah. So this has been a long time coming, being able to actually show the game off. And, we talk a lot on the podcast about basically this challenge of not just doing the dev, but then selling the game at the end of the day, teeing things up for announcement and all that. And so we were really excited to get into the mix for Crashlands 2's official announcement. So the mix and the Guerrilla Collective is this big, essentially, game announcement event that happens in the summer every year around Summer Game Fest. And now I think there's like 12 different kind of festival things happening back to back to back to back, starting basically this like today in June, where it's replacing E3 more or less, which for those who aren't familiar was the Electronics Expo, which existed for like a long time and then just slowly died. All the big companies pulled out of it, etc. And so now everyone kind of does their own thing, and it's sprung up this almost like it's almost like if you went to not a convention, but like a farmer's market sort of a vibe. You know what I mean? Where there's just a lot of different people different vendors showed up with different goodies, and there's just a lot of games announcing this week. So we were lucky enough to get into the mix, and that means we'll be on. You'll see it on Steam. There, I think today, if you go there, you should see the Guerrilla Collective and the Mix presents. And there's a live stream where the trailer's included and all that stuff. So definitely check it out. Give it a wish list on Steam, and let us know what you think. Pop in the Discord, say hey, because it's been a minute since we started working on this thing, and I can't even.
Well, the funny thing about this too is that so much of our early development was experiments, research, tools development. I would say in the first year and a half that we were working on Crashlands 2, a year of that was not actually like working on game systems or content, but on discovery, developing visual stuff, just tons and tons of R&D. And we've now hit kind of a point where things our capacity to deliver stuff into the game is so absurd. Like it's so absurdly high that so we recorded the trailer
that was about 6 weeks ago.
Since then, we've
been
added
farming, fishing,
and pets.
Yep.
Yeah.
As well as a ton of additional quests and content inside, not just the basic
like
systems.
40 more quests, like several dozen more items, several new areas. I mean, it's just like we're actually like capitalizing on all this work that we did early now, and it's really ramping up. But it's kind of hilarious now because it's kind of like we knew this event was coming, and we had to record the trailer, and then by the time the event hits, there's like a billion new things that are in the game that we didn't get to capture. So, which is great because that means we can also do another trailer later.
Yeah.
With even more stuff.
This one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, because now we have like we said, the release is going to be in 2024 sometime, right? So, and I think it is fair to say later than earlier in 2024. Yes. And so we have a year still, right? Mm-hmm. Ish before we actually launch this thing. So we need to be able to still like trickle out stuff, right? Yeah. So that
we're going to be able to do that.
Yeah. And so we had this discussion. We were like, oh, do we update the trailer to show that like we've got fishing and all this stuff, right? And the new fishing stuff is just really fun.
All the new stuff is just ridiculous.
Yeah, all of it is. Like we've taken what we did with the original Crashlands with all of our games of just like it's about like Glee, right? So that any given moment is supposed to just be over the top, just really just deeply fun, And so like Sam's got these just great animations for fishing where Flux is just like fucking going crazy, and like there's like a bobber that's just like moving around. So like Seth programmed it to just like try to escape, and it's like, it's just this very, and then the music that comes over the top, which I haven't even heard the final version of. Actually, I just like saw little clips as they were working on it. But still, even that was just like the whole experience is just so good. And so we have this thing where we're like, do we need this in the trailer too? And the answer is basically like, oh, look, this will just give us more stuff to trickle out over time, over the next year, basically.
Yeah. I mean, I think even the creature variants aren't in the current trailer. I think
that's
that
true.
The week after. So it's one of those things where it's like because you have to create marketing materials and then you essentially go through various processes that are, sometimes months, 2 months long before they come out, and changing stuff while that's all happening. You're working with other parties, right? So changing all this stuff while it's happening is not usually good or an option. So
especially when it needs to stay secret and there's like a deadline and all this stuff. And like people need to check things. And there's so many moving parts when it comes to those materials that, you just.
Well, yeah, I mean, so it was like we're definitely, at least a year out from launch. So the trailer, I'm very pumped about it. I think it showcases a lot of like the vibe and the fun and goofiness of the game and stuff.
Yeah, and just
it is alpha based. It's alpha trailer, right? But yeah, visually and sort of like stylistically and like the core gameplay that you're going to see in there, like that's all pretty locked in, But yeah, it's been super fun to work on the game now, especially these past few weeks, and kind of like seeing, because also like the trailer gave us like an interesting snapshot in time of like exactly what we had, So yeah, and I have to say too, so we did a playthrough this week, because like the game is honestly, it's huge at this point already. And so doing a playthrough is pretty tough because it just takes so much time, right? And so as the game gets further and further along, we are less and less able to do a like quote full playthrough. Instead, we have to kind of like do sections or that kind of a thing. But from playing it this week, the feeling I got was like, this actually to me feels like we're coming way, way, way closer to delivering on what we wanted to do in the first game. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Where there were so many concessions we had to make in that first game because we just didn't have the skill or the experience or the time or the tools or, whatever. And now it feels like we're really getting to just do all that. Yeah, for sure. And there's still tons of stuff that we really tried to figure out, but there's just like, in some cases, it's kind of limitations of, the fact like it's in 2D and stuff like that kind of like throw some wrenches and things. Like we really wanted to do multi-level topography, right? So like cliffs and stuff like that. But as we go through and look at all these different isometric games and how they handle that stuff, and it's like, oh yeah, like cliffs and like elevated terrain in 2D games only go up, like away from the camera. They never go down because then you could end up behind it and then you can't see shit and then the whole thing's ruined. So
that's part of that whole year and a half of tech development was figuring out.
Yeah, we spent a week for all this stuff, just like digging into every possible scenario of who has done isometric, just trying to solve those kinds of problems. And so ultimately you got to just go, okay, well, like this is what we've got. Let's, just make it the best. Yeah. It's just like that's a constraint. It's fine. Every system you make is going to have constraints. Right. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's feeling great. I'm very proud of it. I think people are going to really be stoked.
Jazzed. Yeah. To see. I'm really excited to see. And it was comical actually that the game did, now that the announcement is fully out, I could say it. The trailer did leak a few weeks ago. It leaked in China, of all places.
Well, it leaked here, but then it only mattered that
a few, like 100 people or something like that, like a small number of people.
Yeah, it's basically
talk about how this happened because it's kind of
actually,
hilarious.
This is probably a good note for other devs. Okay, so here's the deal. Okay. You might have an unlisted link to a YouTube trailer of yours, right?
So you can send it to press or whatever,
or apply for things like the mix, like you're applying for things with a game that hasn't been announced yet. And the thing is, it's very annoying to make those things private and have to share them like with email addresses or with passwords, or whatever else, right? Because it's basically hard to do that in a way that makes it so that people who you're sending it to can just access it, and it's not like a big deal. So the issue is that an unlisted YouTube video, while it is not findable in your studio page, say, or searchable, if it is in a playlist, and this is the big one, if it's in a playlist, people can still see it, which is a little surprising. Definitely was to us, and that was sort of the wrinkle.
When you say they can see it, it means like if they're looking at the playlist page on YouTube, or if they're looking at any other video in the playlist,
correct, they'll see it YouTube, inside. Yeah,
it'll show them the unlisted videos in that playlist in the sidebar, and they can just go right.
And it'll go straight to it too. It doesn't even. It's not removed from the queue. So basically, what happened as we were prepping for all this stuff, part of the whole shtick is like, okay, let's move this into our game trailers playlist on our studio page. Did that on like a Thursday, Saturday.
Because again, on YouTube, it specifically says when you mark a video as unlisted, it says only people with the link can see this.
Yes.
That is not true. As soon as it's in a playlist, everybody on Earth can see it.
Yeah.
Well, I guess it's because then YouTube gives them the link.
Exactly.
Right.
You know, so
which is
it's still technically true.
It's technically true, which is kind of a thing. So yeah, good pro tip for other indie devs out there. But I was very excited to see the response because it leaked on Baidu and
Billy.
Yeah, basically somebody it just like instantly uploaded it to these big.
Yeah, it was like 150 people, I think, stumbled across this playlist version, and like one of them just happened to be somebody in China, who realized what they were looking at, and just ripped it.
Monday morning, I woke up and saw a note in the Discord where someone was like, "Oh, congrats on the Butterscotch team going viral in China," and I was like, "The fuck?" And then they posted the link a little later, and I followed it and had 250,000 views
just over the weekend,
or three days, and I was like, "Oh, fuck. That's not containable." About died, but conveniently, it is a separate whole sort of ecosystem over there, and it somehow has not leaked. It didn't leak back across, which was shocking and wonderful in so many ways. So at least I guess we actually have a couple days before the announcement. So
what we should also say was that because that person came into our Discord to say they had seen it on the site and they posted a link to it, and a couple of our mods had actually play tested Crashlands a while back in January or something. I don't know.
So they knew this was legit.
Yes, they knew it was legit, but it was pretty obvious like that wasn't intended to be available. Yeah. So Tim, one of our mods, just pulled off an expert scam where he was like, I don't know, kind of seems like it was maybe AI generated, because we're living in that future right now. We're like,
what's real? Nothing's real.
Yeah, nothing's real anymore. And then the mod team quietly kind of like took those links down and managed
to great job.
Yeah, even in our Discord, like that discussion lasted for like 10 comments and then was just gone. And I was very surprised and impressed.
Mad props to the mod team.
Yeah, that we managed to just like skate by that leak. And
excellent smokescreen support on that.
But we were laughing too because like when we were working on Levelhead, it was so hard to get people to talk about that game, you know. And I still stand by, like, I think Levelhead is one of the best things I personally have ever made.
That's good.
I still believe it's one of the best games out there. It's just really
It's got like 97% positive on Steam still. Like it's just, and actually like I have a Google alert set up and every few months I get an alert where some site is like top 10 best Android games of this year.
Yeah. When
like Levelhead is like in those, Levelhead's just in those lists all the time. And so it's like, it's a great game that is for not very many people, you know? And so it was just so hard to get people to talk about it, you know, and even when we wanted them to. And now we have Crashlands 2 stuff, and it's like we were purposely trying to not let people know about this trailer and stuff, and they fucking got in there anyway and found it and started spreading it. We're like, stop talking about this.
Well, also when we first started working on Crashlands 2, and we were because a lot of how we do QA and like make our builds and get the deployed and stuff is all automated, and it goes through the platforms that we're going to operate on, right? Because like we want to make sure not just that we're testing on Android, but that we're testing on Google Play. You know, not just we're testing on Windows, but we're testing on Steam and so on, right? So the moment we're like, okay, we're building Crashlands 2, then Sure, who does all of our platform specialist stuff, right, goes and makes all of our store pages for the game, right? And
so we can lock in the name.
Yeah, so we can lock in the name, and we can start also then delivering internal builds through those things, right? And mobile is always weird because they just kind of play by different rules over there, right? And I can't remember the exact details of what happened on Google Play, but there was something where he like the page ended up being visible. He set the price to $99, like just as a extra check to make sure nobody tried to buy it, right? But then somehow
it was just like old screenshots from the original Crash.
Yeah,
it was all
there. Just placeholder. Yeah, there's nothing there, so he basically just reserving the name. And there was like a brief period of time where he didn't realize it was actually publicly visible. But it's again one of those things.
in a beta form. So like people had to like really
people had to. It was the
some
same kind of deal
beta
as like the Crashlands playlist leak. Like somebody had to be like doing something else Crashlands related and kind of come across it. And it was the same deal there. It was maybe a week that was up, something like that. Mm-hmm. And in that time, like somebody found it, and there were like 3 or 4 articles about like, oh, Crashlands 2's coming.
People bought it.
And some people bought it just to see what was there because they were like, we could just get refunded anyway, if we need to.
Jeez.
And yeah, exactly. So we're looking at like and this was post Levelhead where like we still feel great about the game. The player community that we do have for Levelhead is amazing and
ludicrous.
But we were still kind of bummed after Levelhead that we just couldn't get people to talk about it.
Right? Traction.
We just couldn't get that traction that we thought the game deserved. And then just like every time the briefest accidental thing happens with Crashlands 2, like we can't make things stop happening, So I'm really hoping once it's actually officially announced and there's a trailer, all this kind of stuff, that this trend, once we're actually trying to do it,
hopefully that continues.
Because it'll be even weirder and more of like frustrating if it turns out like we make this announcement, we do all this cool stuff, and then everyone's like, there's just crickets.
Everyone's like, who gives a shit
after all of that?
Well, that is the nice thing actually about it. Sort of the follow on to that China leak is basically the fact that like seeing it pop off like that after 3 years of sort of just quietly working on it and trying, who you hope it's going to do well, but you don't necessarily have any very strong metrics you can point to.
You just have to trust your own taste, basically.
Yeah, you got to be like, yeah, the first one did well, and we're pretty sure people want this. And we saw this thing with Android Authority covering the accidental visibility of the game on Google Play for a second, and probably all that's good, but you don't know what the demand's going to be. And then seeing it kind of just explode on that site was relieving after I almost had a heart attack.
Yeah, after the panic attack.
Yeah.
The ups and downs.
Yeah, what I'm very excited for too is like seeing how much the game has changed just in the 6 weeks, since we recorded the trailer.
Yeah.
But still, all that time was like development of game systems that will allow us to get into what we're calling our content push phase.
Yeah.
I think we're like legit on the cusp of that phase.
Yeah, we're probably 6 weeks out or so, maybe, because we essentially have boss fights and kind of dungeony stuff left.
Yeah, we just got like a couple of game systems that are more like amalgamations of what's already there, right? Because like a boss fight is like you need every other thing in place. Like you need buffs and like movement and combat and like abilities and play. Like we need the ability to manipulate the world and have quests that lead you there, right? So it's like a boss fight. Once you can do that, then that's like the end point of your game systems, and it's just content, right? And so I will say too, we've had some hilarious moments, especially this past week after our playthrough, where we came up with like a huge list of things that we wanted to do to like really make improve, especially the early game experience. Mm-hmm. But one of them was yesterday we were talking at like we was like 20 minutes until the end of the workday, mm-hmm. and we were like, well, we've got this buff debuff system. We got these ability systems, blah blah blah. But we're still missing stuns, like the ability to interrupt an enemy and render them unable to do something for a moment. Which is like that was the first thing we gave you in the original Crashlands was the space wrench that stuns a creature, which is great because it basically allows you to create these moments of opportunity where you can really like get in there and do some good damage and stuff like that, right? So it's very useful. And it was 4:40 p.m. and Sam and I were like, well, we want to get these stuns in. Let's take a look and see what we've got, right? And we already have all these game systems now developed. Yeah. And I was like, I think if I just add a checkbox to our buffs that just says stun, then I can like just add a few lines of code in our buff system to read that state, mm-hmm. and then we're good to go. And so literally 11 minutes later, we had stuns in the game. Mm-hmm. And then we were kind of sitting back like, does this mean that, because we've had the buff system in for months and months and months, right? So like, does this mean that for like 4 or 5 months, we've been 11 minutes away from having stuns in the game?
Probably. And
I think so.
That's where you want to be, though. You know what I mean? That it's like everything you implement was always just 20 minutes away. I mean, fuck. You
just had to decide when it was time to do it.
Yeah.
I think this also is a good way to kind of set up how to think about what it means to make a game of this scale, right? Because here we are now saying we're about a year away from launch, right? And we have all these really robust systems. Like Seth said, we're adding these like new final, like the big final features we're adding in less than a week each, right? And there's like a couple left. And adding the little stuff is taking 10 minutes, right? Mm-hmm. So now you just
11. Let's not 11 minutes.
So now just wrap your brain around the fact that we still need a year, right? Now that all the systems are in place, to build out the full suite of all the actual gameplay content and the actual full experience that a player has.
Yeah, it does take more than 10 minutes to, like make art for a boss and animate it.
Yeah, or tell a good story, or right. There's that. So, but we're beginning to move away from that phase of where like getting stuff into the game is just becoming like increasingly trivial, right? The systems all the main systems are all there, which means that also allows us to focus on like the weirder stuff, right? Where it's like, I don't know how much of that we're going to end up doing because it all depends on the systems and what we decide for the overarching game experience. But like a lot of what makes games fun is when like something deviates from expectations, and especially if it's just like once, right?
Yep.
That's the kind of stuff that we actually now can then start to do because everything else is fine. It's all taken care of, right? Like by default, if you need content, you can push it in there, you can make it work. But if we want to do one-off weird stuff, we've actually freed up Seth's time as the main programmer on the project to then go start doing some weird stuff that we otherwise wouldn't have had room for.
Yep.
Again, I don't know how much that will do, but
yeah, or my time just goes into, continuing to make the tools better and faster and,
which is a lot of it will be. Yeah, it's just making it all better.
And like we've also had just these fun moments just like this week after the playthrough where, for example, like we've got these little like thistles that are in the game. And as part of our conversation at the playthrough is we're like, we want there to be more interesting and dynamic ways for the player to engage in combat and stuff early, as opposed to like having to wait a while to get like some cool
handful of different tools basically for combat.
Tools or gadgets or whatever. So, just like open up more interesting gameplay choices for a newer player. And so we're just kind of talking through what we already had. And one of the things we had is like there's these thistle plants that if you chop them with your machete and they have thistles growing out of them, then you can get the thistles off of them. And up until now, those thistles were just a crafting component. So you could use them in all these different recipes to make typically weapons and stuff like that because they're pointy, right? And so we were just kind of like looking through what we had early game, and those thistles kind of stood out as something that, are an easy candidate. Yeah, it's like, what if you could just throw those? What if you could just throw those thistles
Chucking
at
stuff
enemies?
is so fun,
Yeah, as sort of like an early
projectile,
consumable projectile. Yeah, and that also gives you a choice of like, do I chuck this thing at enemies or do I stockpile them and use them to craft them into like bigger, more robust weapons? But that transition of like creating a projectile out of these things and making them wieldable items and, getting rid of the old just like basic component version of the thistles, like that whole process didn't require any code because Sam just did it through the game changer. Took 25 minutes. Said we've got a new projector, right? So it's like that's the kind of phase we're getting into now where over the next year, maybe a little bit more than a year, it's like every 20 minutes there's like some new thing in the game. Like this is going to be real big.
Really big. And the thing is we talked a lot about what the goals were with this project. We've talked a lot about that on the podcast and how the intent was to make something where we were able to make authored content at scale, right? Not just algorithmic stuff, like the original where stuff you kind of ran out of interesting changes basically, after the first 5 to 7 hours. So, and most games, that's sort of like about the point where even a pretty robust game design kind of starts breaking down after usually like 7 to 10 hours. It's hard. It's very hard to sustain interest beyond that point, which is why when you see a game like Elden Ring or Zelda's Tears of the Kingdom and stuff, where they essentially are enabling a whole other kind of play that lasts for a lot longer by either providing just a tremendous variety of constantly interesting things in the case of like Elden Ring, or some room for player creativity in the case of something like Zelda, right? Where you can start strapping rockets to shit and just kind of goofing around. So we're trying to find a kind of midpoint between those where it's like the creativity is expressed through, finding the thing, basically going out in the world, finding the stuff that you like, building up your little kit of all these weird tools and like just the fun weapon that you like the most. that has its own kind of weird behaviors. And so a lot of it is, so much of the work so far has just been getting the systems online and enough content to make sure that it works. That what I'm really excited about is basically, as we enter this next phase, in many ways actually returning to some of that content and making it like just more interesting, right? This whole, this, now we have some stuns. Now you could actually pick up this thistle that we've had in the game since the beginning of time. And like, that was one of the first things, right? And now you could chuck it at stuff. And it's like just going back and refining the stuff that exists, because it's not like we need, what you'll see in the trailer is just the first zone. Not even all of it, but just,
just some of
stuff from the first zone. And the plan is to have another 2, and there's going to be
Nintendo style. Everything comes in 3s,
It's got to come in 3s.
There's 4 is too many and 2 is not nearly enough.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be just a lot, but the goal is not just for it to be a lot of the same thing, if that makes sense. That was the whole point. And the trouble with making a billion unique things that are all interesting in their own ways is basically management of that content at scale, right? And how do you manage the uniqueness of 1,000 different things? How do you make them all interesting actually, and then not die because of the complexity associated with that, right?
Yeah, well, actually, I think the way that you do it is via authored stuff, because like when we're talking about the concept of a zone, it's like in the first game, a zone was an algorithmically generated place that had specific terrain, specific kinds of creatures, and specific predefined spawn patterns for like, log trees spawn up until this point, and, tar pits spawn at this distance from the center. So it's,
it's radially symmetrical, right? Like it's as you move out from the middle. Yeah, if you go and you won't give a direction, like it's not going to look exactly the same. But like the way that the behavior works is just as you get distance from the center, the algorithm for how we generate terrain and then what creatures appear, resources, and so on, changes purely as a function of distance, right? So you could go any direction and it doesn't matter from the center because
it ends up being samey, right?
Yeah, the basically, and I think that you can think of it as like which direction you go doesn't change the overarching gameplay experience. It'll change some of the details, right? But not the overarching thing versus like a constructed game where if you go north, like you run into the barren wasteland of the settlement of the sheep people or whatever, right? And like if you go south, like some other thing happens, like it's where all of it's actually completely different experiences.
Yeah, so like in a weird way, we've got what we're sort of internally considering to be the first quote zone. But there's already a whole bunch of really different and interesting like types of creatures and terrains and regions that have a different ecology and stuff. Yeah. So it's more like the first act.
Yeah.
Right.
The zones are less strict, right? Than like
exactly. Yeah. Because they're constructed, right? So we could just suddenly be like, oh yeah, suddenly like there's a rocky area over here with like different kinds of creatures. And it's still part of this quote like first zone, but it looks and feels totally different. Right?
Do we already know if the zones are going to be the same kind of like basically loading screen change like from original Crashlands, or is there going to
so far we've been able to keep it all in one world where you don't have to
be contiguous. Yep.
Right. So then zone is a lot looser of a concept because within a zone,
it's more just
there's a lot
like
more variation already, and then as we move into a new zone,
you'll walk there.
You'll just walk there, and will you see any of the same stuff, or is it going to be?
Oh yeah, there'll be some of the same stuff.
That's the things like this is some of those like the scaling questions, which is okay. Once you make the first zone, then you have the second zone. The fact that you can walk to it means something different than it did in the original, where we sort of.
It sounds like the concept of zone is more of about a production thing, as in like how do we decide when some set of things are complete enough that we can move on to another chunk of things, right?
Yeah.
And it's also about storytelling because, for example, you may want to make it so that there's like a particular bottleneck moment of like a big boss fight or something that enables the player to traverse to the next area. And we can do that with our quest system where, for example, like we can have a quest that like once it's completed, like a land bridge appears between the two zones and now you can traverse, right?
So especially for an open world game where you want to provide tons of ways that players can do stuff, and it's really hard to like deliver a particular linear experience or gate it in certain ways because you want to allow for a lot of stuff. And so you're basically saying we're going to have some very strict choke points, like the between zone choke points, right?
It will be no matter,
right, where there'll be something that keeps you from just like going right through that thing. So that we can have more control over what it means to move from this zone to that zone, basically.
Yeah, and that's always been the huge challenge with making with the first game and with Crashlands 2 is trying to bridge the gap between an open world game and a narrative based game, right? Because even branching narrative is linear because the player still has to move through their specific path sequentially, right? You can't like do the middle of a story, then the beginning, and then jump to the end, and then go back to the beginning again. Like that's not how stories work. Unless you're Quentin Tarantino, but it makes for a very strange game, right? Yeah. If you can like do quests in any order with no prerequisite, nothing the characters say will make any sense, right? And so you've got to find ways to have lots of ways for the player to explore and go to places that you haven't decided when they're going to go there necessarily, but you've just opened up their access to be able to go there at some point, and then whenever they go there from that point forward is gravy. Like you just got to plan for that and try to make sure the stories don't make things too linear, and make sure that the open world thing doesn't make things so open that the stories become confusing, right? And that's where like so much of our tooling and design has gone into trying to manage the counterbalance between those two concepts. So
I imagine that's a lot of like this idea of going into this first phase of developing all the main systems and getting the content push. I imagine, Seth, at your time, certainly for the next like half year, once that core stuff is done, is going to be like just shoring up and adding additional tools and all this kind of stuff to these systems to be able to start managing just the scale problem.
Yeah, we need to scale them up. Yeah, we need to be able to see more things, parse information about player flow, like more developer.
It's going to be all like UI, UX work, really, right? It's just like
pretty much. Yeah. So it's a huge challenge, but man, this thing's it's really coming together. So I'm very proud of it. So yeah, again, go to Steam, wish list it. You can't do anything about mobile. There's no wish listing, but just send thoughts and prayers about that, and we'll hear them.
Yeah, tweet at Netflix and tell them how pumped you are that Crashlands 2 is coming.
Yeah, and also I would say like big thanks to them. They've been great to work with. With all this stuff.
Yeah. So far, is it fair to say our easiest business partner?
Yeah,
I think that's fair to say.
Yeah, they've been great. Yeah. All right. Well, you guys want to get into some questions?
Yeah, let's go.
All right. These questions come from our listeners over at podcast.bscotch.net. So if you'd like to get your question onto a future episode, you can just go there, ask it, and also vote for other people's questions. Be nice. Vote for other people.
Spread the love around.
Highest upvoted question comes from Beekie Boppaboop, who says, if you were to commission someone to make a game, what would you ask for? This was inspired by a tweet, I believe, where this developer was like saying, hey, I'm going to make you a game. Tell me what game you want. And then people would like tweet and then, slap together like a little game.
Or whatever. They do like a tiny jam sort of stuff.
Yeah. So if you just had like a game where you were like, this would be kind of goofy or fun to play, but I certainly couldn't be bothered to make it. What would you make?
I think we played internally every so often. Every quarter usually we do our management pizza parties, which are, it's a joke about corporate policy, but also it is actually fun for us where we order everybody pizza, we buy a game, and then everybody plays together, right? We played this heist game. I can't remember.
Yeah, what was that called?
I can't even remember.
I literally don't remember.
It's blocky.
I think
holy shit! Why can't we remember the name of that game?
I think we talked about it. That's the thing. It's like art style wise and name wise, apparently not particularly thematically memorable, but the game itself was so fun. Like so fun.
I'm pulling up Steam to see if I can remember, or if I can find it.
We played with our whole studio, so it's like 7 or 8 people.
It's literally Perfect Heist 2. That was the
Perfect Heist. That's what it's called.
Yeah. But Perfect Heist 2.
Oh, nice.
I guess the sequel.
Perfect Heist again.
The squeakquel.
Yeah. So like those kind of heisty games are so fun that I would love to see another one like that. But I think that has a stronger thematic or like a particular angle on the setting rather than just like cops and robbers sort of thing, but like almost like like if you could raid a magic vault, like a Harry Potter vault, you know what I mean? Like that sort of level of like, let's inject fantasy into this and have it be, because that way you could just kind of do, whatever the fuck. I think that's so fun.
I think my answer to this is like, I feel like any concept you come up with, like someone's already made that game.
I don't think so, because I've got one.
Okay, what's yours?
I've got one that is probably a it's probably one of the worst games you could ever play or make, but it would be fucking hilarious for like 8 minutes. 5v5 multiplayer game where you play as a Voltron style robot where each person pilots one of the limbs.
You're talking about QWOP.
It's basically 5v5 QWOP, but where each person controls, because that's how it works in Power Rangers and shit. Like each person controls a limb, which is insane.
In Pacific Rim, you could do a Pacific Rim spinoff with that shit. That'd be fun.
Pacific Rim, like one person controls the left arm and leg. And
honestly, even 2 people would be fucking wild with that sort of
because
thing.
So this game would be like 4v4 maybe. So it's like, 2 arms, 2 legs, per robot. And then there would have to be a lot of spectators allowed, right? Because like I would want to watch that shit because that would be
you got a good
hilarious
sim nonsense basically, right?
And I think trying to see like if you actually did get a group of people who really did figure it out, it would be kind of amazing.
Oh yeah. Well, you totally would get a group of people like that. But you could see you could see that having a really weird underground competitive.
Absolutely.
Thing.
Yep.
Yeah, but I feel like awesome. Because like in shows like Power Rangers and that kind of shit, it always skips past the part where the first time they form up the robot, all they do is like flop around on the ground like a fish because like how the fuck do you coordinate each person controlling a limb? This makes no sense.
Yeah, they really conveniently don't even like because even with
even talk about it.
Even with like the Jaegers and the Jaeger stuff, like when Pacific Rim, they do make a big deal about because it's called drifting, right? Where it's
you have to like mentally
like a mind meld.
Yeah.
But they're very careful not to actually really indicate what the separation of duties is, right? At least like as I can recall.
Well, because both people just do the same thing.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what
you just need like twice the brain power, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a computational power problem that they're solving, not like not a coordination problem.
Right. So they're not doing but with Power Rangers, I'm pretty sure it's like each person is just controlling a body part,
a limb,
right?
Yeah.
But they
Which
again
would
like
be insane.
Yeah, because like, the only thing they really did is they just like they would tell somebody to like activate like the super punch or whatever. But that was the only like explicit indication you had that they were. Besides that, they just were those body parts, right? So yeah, they really should have been. They should have had that moment, like in the Power Rangers reboot, which I did enjoy. It was pretty fun. They really should have had that moment where they all Megazord together and then just fucking fall over and can't do anything.
I feel like the closest.
There's no scenario.
You know what I mean? The ships, like running the ships in Sea of Thieves. I've seen some of those ship fights, and it is hilarious and pure chaos because it's like people stake out their duties, and then shit hits the fan, and now something's on fire and someone is on fire, and there's like that's like the closest I've seen to that sort of feel, and it is.
There's also
absolutely hilarious.
There's a submarine game, just like it's a multiplayer survival thing. I can't remember what it's called.
Oh yeah,
it's touched.
Yeah, thaumaturgy.
I think is it thaumaturgy? That's like
no, it's like barotrauma.
Barotrauma. Yes, there you go. Thank you. Yep.
Yeah, barometric like pressure and anyway. So barotrauma, which I can't say I really enjoy because it's just so fucking brutal, but it does have this. But a lot of people really like it. It has that same kind of like cult following, right? But like you're running a submarine with a bunch of people, you're spec'd into classes, and then there's just a whole bunch of stuff that's like, so somebody has to maintain the nuclear reactor and keep like refilling canisters, right? And like somebody's mounting the guns, and you're being attacked by aliens, and things board your ship, and like you need to leave the ship to go like get minerals and stuff, right?
So it's kind of like Lovers in a Dangerous Space Time was the first one of these games that I played. That was like this, where it's
only like intentionally brutal, but yeah.
But I think the hilarious part with something like a bipedal robot, right?
Yeah, it's just squarely in co-op territory at that point.
Yeah, because of course, if you're in a spaceship that's floating in space or like a boat, right? And it's like, well, if somebody turns the rudder slightly wrong, it's not like the boat just like flips completely upside down and everybody fucking dies, right? Like so many things have to go so wrong for your boat to sink.
Yep.
Yeah, right. But like if you're just like 2 people controlling legs, that on its own, you're going to be on your ass immediately.
Right. It's not going from like no function to like incrementally improved function. If like the better people do, the better the whole thing is, right? With a QWOP like experience, it's just all or nothing. And
everybody has to do everything perfectly, or else the whole thing just flops.
Yeah, and it's not just like you go from
yet, you know what I mean?
and you don't even go from like neutral to better. you start at neutral, and the moment anybody touches anything, it goes either into
you
pure
start
bad,
in a T-pose.
You start T-pose,
or it goes into an unstable good, or that can still collapse at any moment in a kind of unrecoverable way. That would be pretty.
Yeah,
that would be very satisfying.
I feel like it's just one of those things we all take for granted. Yeah. People have these robots, and then when they merge them together, of course, it's more powerful.
Of course.
I don't understand, but if you really think about it, it is the dumbest concept you could possibly use for any kind of a combat situation, going from independent, capable targets that are easy to control to put all your eggs in one basket and then require perfect coordination to do it. And it loses so many capabilities because it like can't fly anymore and all this. And now it's basically just punching things, I guess. So, that's the game. If somebody makes that game, I will definitely pick it up because it's just,
we'll see it.
Now the question is, I would probably be a left leg main. What about you guys? I feel like there's probably a rivalry between leg mains and arm mains because the arms would be like, hey, fucking legs, like keep us upright so we can do some punching.
It's the classic support DPS sort of problem, right?
It is.
The legs are going to be the unsung heroes,
But of course, the arms, as they swing around wildly, will throw off the center of gravity, and then the legs will have to just constantly be trying to compensate and catch what the upper body is.
So you said 5 players, so I got 4.
I switched it to 4, because like there's always 5 in these movies, but I never could figure out like
what do you do if you're controlling the or the head?
I think they just chill and smoke weed.
They're just hey guys.
Hey, good job.
Keep those legs
arms.
Going. I mean, I think if you made it so that the player didn't actually completely destruct if they were if that thing fell over, then you'd also have interesting alternative locomotion strategies involved, like crawling. Crawling would be big.
Doing the worm
for the noobs.
Yeah. And there'd be a lot of grappling combat, right? Because both entities are gonna have trouble staying upright.
Yep. So you're gonna
but if they lean on each other.
Yeah. It's like a Voltron judo sort of a situation.
Yeah. Or it's like when boxers get so tired they can't stand up and they just lean against each other and punch each other in the ribs,
Yep.
There could be a lot of that kind of a thing.
Yep.
Yeah. It'd be like that, but all the time. Yeah. Now, okay, so I know I said nobody would ever. I feel like I would want to actually play this game at least for like 5 minutes.
Yeah,
so
somebody
make
a
this.
Jam
I'm not
one of
making
those. It doesn't need to be good, because it's just
so, the thing is it's got to exist on itch, right? Because there's so many people making shit these days.
Yeah, there's no way that's new. Where is it?
Somebody has to have made it, I think it's the problem with all these things is that it still depends so much on execution that the question of if you could just hire somebody to make a game for you, what game would you make? It just doesn't really work because you still need the execution to be the thing that you actually
think you
want.
have to say, and it would be good. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or good enough that you could test.
I mean, it's implied.
It's really I think it's really just to come into if there's a game that you could just have exist that currently doesn't,
right,
without you having to do it. I think is really probably what the question boils down to, right?
Yeah, you can also make this an asymmetrical multiplayer game where one person plays as the monster trying to destroy the entire city. And then basically groups of 4 players will come in and Voltron together and try to defeat that person. And if they can't, then a new round of 4 players will come in.
I mean, way more fun than that would be fucking take Fortnite, 100 people or whatever, 99 people, right? But one of them is Godzilla, right? And then everybody else is you're flying fighter jets and tanks and you're trying to prevent them from getting to some target or something, right? Or destroying the center of the city or whatever the fuck.
Yeah,
it is, right?
unless that one person goes AFK and then I guess the whole thing is bugged.
It's just a free Godzilla barbecue.
You just a new player becomes Godzilla or whatever, there's you find some tricks, but there are games like this, right? But that degree of asymmetricality and that degree of scale isn't really out there yet, as far as I know, or at least not delivered
asymmetrical.
Yeah, Fortnite's played with it a bit, where they I think you could get the Thanos gauntlet.
Yeah.
They've done some of that where it's suddenly someone is just super powerful for a while, and they kind of get a target on their back, which is fun.
Yeah.
So
I think just take it to the extreme. Can you imagine? Because there's this dream. I remember we certainly had when we were younger. And,
of course, yeah.
I've heard everybody who wants to make games for a living has the same goal, right? Which is their dream game
FPS
exactly is the one that's every scale of gameplay just all exists at the same time. You can participate at whatever level you want or whatever. And this is but I think realistically, you can never have that game because just logistically it doesn't make any sense. But there are aspects of that you really could capture. I think with today's level of tech, I think.
I think you can, because like EVE Online is that game.
Yeah, there's a really good war game that is on Steam that I know has blown up, and it's like you have to do supply chain management and like clear roads and stuff, but like as individual actors on the ground, and it is like a war effort thing. And it's
I think what is that? I think
is it called Foxhole or something? Fox?
Maybe.
Yeah,
we have to
like
dig into this genre a bit and see if we can find some stuff to track.
Yeah, because like these concepts are generally incompatible. So for example, like in an RTS, you select units and tell them exactly what to do and what to attack and where to go.
Yeah, but if those are real people, like what if they don't want
if those are real people, then the best you can do is suggest them where to go. Like you have a different perspective on the field, right? And there are plenty of games like that, which like I was saying, EVE Online. There's people who quote play EVE Online who haven't been subscribed to the game in a decade because they actually just manage a corporation in the game. And they just like do data crunching, or they're a programmer and they like work with the EVE API to make stuff for their corp, and then there's like people who play as a fleet commander. Like they're there in a ship, but their role is actually like directing everybody else and telling them what to do, who to target, whether to warp out.
Right. But all of those things you allow them to arise naturally out of just having the need for organization, but you don't actually turn them into game systems. Like that's
exactly.
That's
the difference.
Yeah.
So I would play the shit out of it. If I could like hop into there's just like a fucking tank laying on the ground. I could just like jump into it and then drive up to Godzilla and like try to kill Godzilla, and then Godzilla just fucking steps on me and I just respawn somewhere else. Go like load up on my like find bazookas or whatever, or like fucking
now you got
climb Godzilla. Like if you take it, what's that game where that kind of sad game where you murder those like giant beautiful
Shadow Colossus.
Shadow of the Colossus.
You want to do like a swarm of ticks on Godzilla?
Yeah, imagine. And then and now if like because like in like the more recent kind of Godzilla stuff, there's all this stuff with like the parasites that live on Godzilla, right? That are themselves like, and now you're like imagine like you're now like climbing Godzilla, fighting these creatures, like trying to get. Yeah, they're fucking dope. with 99 other people. Actually, even if this wasn't an asymmetrical game, like as in like you don't need somebody to beat Godzilla.
Shadow of the Colossus.
Shadow of the Colossus
would be fucking amazing.
Yeah, but where instead of murdering beautiful creatures, you're murdering Godzilla who's trying to kill everybody.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, Shadow of the Colossus I found to be like it was. I found it to be one of the most depressing games I've ever. I never played it. I just watched other people play it, but like, that was a depressing. Even the music was like it like made you sad the whole time.
Yeah, those poor giants, they're just walking around.
They really were just minding their own business, weren't they? Like,
I can't remember why you had to kill them. I think there was as you would expect, there was a woman you had to rescue from a situation. I think she was asleep or something, and then you had to like murder colossuses to like.
There's some shadows in him or something. I don't remember what the fuck the story is.
I don't know.
It was good.
But those colossus were so cool because they were basically statues, but then a lot of them had like plants because they were so old, right? They had like plants growing on, but like giant like vine beards and stuff that you could like latch onto. Yeah, it's a very cool and interesting like way like combat style. But yeah, thematically it was kind of sad. Yep. I wish there was the Colossuses were more of like dicks.
Yeah, they needed to be more evil.
They need to be villains instead of just chilling. So, anyways, I think that's all the time we have for this week. Once again, definitely head over to Steam, wishlist, Crashlands 2. Check out the trailer. Check out all the stuff, and
share it widely. Tell everybody that Crashlands 2 is coming. Share the trailer. Yeah, that's the most helpful stuff you can do for us is that.
Do all that.
Yep.
So we'd like to thank our producers, Fat Bard and Sampa DaCosta, for putting the podcast together. And thanks to our community moderators who keep our Discord running and keep our leaks from getting too leaky.
Yeah, real good.
To get more involved in the Butterscotch community, go to podcast.bscotch.net, where we have links to the Discord, a way for you to donate, and links to the archives. Thank you all for listening. We'll see you next week.
Bye.